Eagles Entertainment.
Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that move, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's meet these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Here we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right of the week, and we're taking a look at some Eagles draft history as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 309. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with, three different people. If you guys have been listening to this show, you know I've talked about a new segment that debuted on the Journey to the Draft podcast this fall, and that was a segment that we called Scout Stories, where each week I caught up with a member of the Eagles scouting department to talk about a current member of the Eagles and what they were like coming out of college, kind of reliving the scouting report when they were coming into the NFL draft. I aired small bites of some of those interviews here and there throughout the season here on this show, but with the Super Bowl having come and gone, it's the off season for everybody here today. It's draft season for all 32 teams in the NFL, and I thought today would be a perfect opportunity to sit back and listen to three members of the team's personnel staff talk about a bunch of players on this Eagles roster. There are a bunch of lessons learned in these conversations, takeaways that I bring with me moving forward into the pre-draft process. So sit back, relax. We're going to hear from Eagles Assistant Director of Player Personnel, Ian Cunningham, College Scouting Director, Anthony Patch, and then Area Scout, Sean Heinlein. We're going to cover a bunch of different players here in this episode. So hope you guys enjoy that. It'll be a really fun, kind of look back at a series that debuted over on the Journey to the Draft podcast this fall. It's a fun look inside the draft process. Before we get going with Chalk Talk, though, just a couple of quick things, housekeeping things here to hit on. First up, obviously, if you haven't yet, please go check out the Journey to the Draft podcast. Not only do you get this kind of access that you're going to experience here in today's episode, but you'll get exclusive analysis that is unlike any other NFL draft podcast available. And it doesn't matter if you're an Eagles fan or a fan of any team, but we've got Dane Brugler, myself, Ben Fennell, and starting next week, Greg Cosell, each and every week, breaking down prospects all across the draft landscape. So if you want to know who the top players are, that is the show to subscribe to. Also, for those of you who look forward to our Scouting Report episodes, we've got a fun one this week. On Wednesday, Ben Fennell and I will be discussing our biggest takeaways after studying Justin Herbert, the rookie sensation quarterback from the LA Chargers. We're going to do a 4-game study of Justin Herbert later this week. So if you want to watch along with us, go check out all of his third down passes from weeks 10 to 13. That's the 4-game sample we selected. The Chargers actually played 4 AFC East teams during that stretch. So you can watch Justin Herbert against the Patriots, the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Jets. Should be easy enough for you to go and find all of those throws on third down. It's going to be a fun conversation because not only will we get some insight into the play of a future star at the position, but we'll also get some look into some of the philosophies of the Eagles' new offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen. So be sure to go check that out later this week right here on this channel. That being said, let's get this show started. It's time to kick things off right now in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, joining us this week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast to talk about Eagles defensive end Brandon Graham during his days at the University of Michigan is Eagles Senior Director of College Scouting, Anthony Patch. And Patch, welcome back to the show, man. Excited to talk about BG. And I remember the big thing was he had that huge Senior Bowl in 2010, and obviously was a really productive player at Michigan. Excited to get your memories of the pre-draft process when it came to BG.
Yeah, you said it right, Fran. I mean, that Senior Bowl was unbelievable. Both sides. I mean, he showed it all. Just was in. I just remember one-on-one sitting in the end zone that Senior Bowl then, and I'll tell you what, just a great week. And the interview was even better. I mean, he hasn't changed, Fran, in the time we've got him. He hasn't. I mean, he hasn't. He bleeds big blue and he bleeds eagle green. I mean, through and through. Smile on the face. I mean, every day. I remember sitting and interviewing him in Mobile, and the same thing. I said, I love this kid. And, and you see him now. He I'm not in the office every day, but if I come in, whatever, a few months, it's like he's my best friend. Big smile, and you say anything about Michigan, he's all fired up. And, he's everything we asked for, Trent Cole, and I think we had Darren Howard at the time, kind of at the end of their careers. And, we took Brandon, and we talked to our staff, and he bleeds green, and he's what you want from effort, relentless, how you work and how you approach, practice, games and everything. He's a true example of him and Vinny Curry, of, what we want. And, guys, just effort and whatnot, enjoying the game. He enjoys the game. He enjoys playing the game. And that's, that's what we look for. And, even to this day, what's he, 10 years in now? 10 years. Yeah. And,
so the thing that always stands out to me thinking about BG and his career has been like the mental toughness and the ability to kind of fight through adversity, because, and he's talked about this. He's heard the noise from early in his career. Oh, he was a bust. The Eagles should have taken Earl Thomas. They should have done this. They should have done that. He was a backup. The Eagles go out and they sign Jason Babb and they bring in Connor Barwin. You mentioned Darren Howard was here. Trent Cole was here. They draft Vinny Curry in the second round. And they had the change in system. They go from 4-3 to 3-4 and back. And BG outlasts all of it and played at such a consistently high level over the course of this, the last 7-8 years. To me, like, that's when you're talking about the off-field character traits you're looking for in those guys. Like, that's what you're looking for, right? Is those guys to be able to fight through that level of adversity and still be the same guy.
Yeah, he's just 2 R words: resilient and relentless. He's just. Whatever was thrown his way early in his career there, I remember those times. But he pushed through and, sure enough, your fourth quarter in Minnesota, and who makes the biggest play, when we need it, a stop, makes a big play. And, Lombardi is part and due. I mean, that second half, and you're just praying something happens, and he makes that play. And Derek scoops it up, and he just, he comes through, whatever it is, I don't know, Fran, you said it all. And the Michigan, the background was, excellent what they spoke there. And, I'll tell you what, man, you don't get a bigger smile when you say Big Blue to that guy, though. That's all you have to say. And he'll grow even bigger,
That's right.
So he loves Michigan, and he bleeds Eagle green. So.
Well, joining me this week here on the Journey of the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, to talk about Eagles running back Miles Sanders, is Eagles Assistant Director of Player Personnel, Ian Cunningham, to talk about Miles Sanders. Look, we're in year 2 with Miles Sanders. We're a year and change in. Excited to get your thoughts, your memories on seeing him not just in the spring of 2019, but just throughout that pre-draft process. Give us your thoughts, your evaluation on Miles when he was coming out of Penn State.
Yeah, Fran, it's kind of funny because if you remember correctly, they had a guy by the name of Saquon Barkley there before him. So you really didn't get a chance to know who Miles was until his junior year. And when he started, and he hit the ground running. I mean, had a tremendous junior year. I remember the Maryland game and the Illinois game vividly in terms of just what you saw was his electricity as a runner, his balance, his make-miss vision. And the good thing is that you got to see him catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So a lot of the things that we're seeing today, we got to see that year. And then getting him with a running backs coach like Deuce Staley, you knew that he was going to improve his ball handling. And because I think he had about five fumbles as a junior, but he improved that, and, tremendous athlete.
So take us through that. I mean, how do you, when you have a guy that's got that, that small sample size, I guess, I just want to give the listeners a takeaway. When you're looking at guys that, all right, he had that 1 year as the full-time guy, you just have to, every team is going to look at that differently in terms of, hey, we get him in with Deuce. We have confidence in our running backs coach and in that the guys in that room that they'll be able to correct some issues. And, he's got his other God-given abilities that now you've got something to work with.
I think you kind of look at it like this. You can look at it twofold. When you see a guy with only 270 plus career carries, he's got a lot of tread on the tire. So he's relatively young to the position in terms of just what he can bring to the table. And you have a running backs coach like Deuce, who's played the position, who can teach him the nuances of the position, how to handle the ball a little bit better, how to set guys up out of the backfield as a route runner. To make him a little bit more explosive. So you knew that there was upside with him. And like I said, going back to those 2 games, you really saw the explosion, the lateral make miss, the cut ability. And you have to take into account, I don't think he was that healthy that junior year as well. His first game in the season against Pitt, I believe, was his most healthy game. So he played the whole year a little banged up.
And then the last question for you, there was so much made about him as a pass catcher. I remember we talked with James Franklin after the Eagles drafted him. He said, yeah, we were really hoping to get him more involved as a pass catcher here as a senior. You guys obviously saw that, that potential during the private workout. So again, for the takeaway for the listener, just because a guy wasn't asked to do something in college doesn't mean he can't do it in the NFL.
Correct. I mean, you have to take the sample size as a given in terms, I think he had about 34 receptions as a junior, and you try to pick through those and just see if he can track the ball, how he caught the ball. Did he catch it with his hands? Did he catch it with his body? Was he able to track it over his shoulder? How he was able to set guys up as a route runner, set defenders up as a route runner, and then just trying to project that to our level and seeing how that would transfer to our level. And he did a tremendous job on the private workout. And like Coach Franklin said, the opportunities that he was given, he made the most of them.
Well, happy to be joined this week by Eagles Assistant Director of Player Personnel, Ian Cunningham. And Ian, thanks so much for joining us, man, to talk about Eagles defensive back Jalen Mills. And I say defensive back because obviously he's played a number of different roles throughout the course of his career here with the Eagles. Interested to get your thoughts on him when you scouted him during his time at LSU.
Hey, Fran, it's interesting enough, he had the same type of career at LSU as well. If you remember his first few years, he played corner at LSU and then moved to safety as a senior. And then as a senior, he was hurt for about 5 games that year with, I believe, a broken leg. So the evaluation process with him coming out, he kind of had to pick and choose what you wanted to watch. He had to watch him at safety as a senior. You had to watch him at corner. It was a little bit unfair to him just to watch him at safety as a senior because he was, like I said, he was banged up. But that versatility you loved his competitiveness. They spoke glowingly about him as a competitor on the practice field. You see him in games, the same types of things that we see at NovaCare on a day in, day out basis. He did in Baton Rouge as well. So his career at LSU was very similar to what it's been here for us in Philadelphia.
Talk to me about his Senior Bowl. And I feel like if I remember right, he played corner at the Senior Bowl, right? So like when you see that and he's like, all right, you saw the 3 years at corner early in his career. He makes that transition to safety. He spent some time in the inside as well. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl and gets back at corner. Does that help you in terms of like the evaluation? Say like, all right, like he could still play on the perimeter against some of the best, his peers coming out in the senior class.
No doubt. It does help, especially at the Senior Bowl because he's playing against the best of the best. And granted, he's playing against the best of the best probably in practice at LSU, right? So, but just to see him at corner at the Senior Bowl, he had arguably one of the better weeks that week in Mobile. He picked off several passes in every practice. He sat on routes. You saw the competitiveness, the same things in which you saw at practice at LSU. That competitive spirit, that toughness you saw on the practice field in Mobile as well. And I'm sure there were a lot of scouts trying to go back and change a couple of their reports because he was arguably the best in show that week down in Mobile.
And then the last question about Jalen was, when you look at it, just kind of bringing this big picture for fans, they're looking at it maybe for their team or maybe they're looking at it for all 32 teams. When you have a player with that level of versatility in the secondary, especially in today's league, with the positionless football, how do you, as a fan on the outside, how hard is it to try and say, like, project what this guy can be? Because all 32 teams may look at him in different ways.
You hit the nail on the head. It is positionless football now, and you kind of grade him for what he can do and what you believe he can do. What he can do on the football field, what you see him, how it's going to transfer over to our level. I think really with like a player like Jalen is that versatility to be able to play safety, be able to play corner, be able to play nickel or star, whatever position it may be. That versatility is huge, especially with our defense and several defenses in the NFL. So having a player like that is great to have on your side.
Well, joining us this week here on Scout Stories is Eagles Southwest area scout Sean Highland. Sean, thanks for joining us on the show, man.
I appreciate it, friend. Thank you.
So let's talk through Jason Peters. You were in Buffalo when Jason Peters was coming out of Arkansas. Take us back, man. I mean, obviously this is a long time ago, but take us through when JP was coming out and just the projection from him, obviously a college tight end, making that move to eventually the offensive line.
Right. That was the thing. I was I was on the road for only a couple of years at that point, young scout, get into Arkansas, and they're just loaded with talent back then. He was lined up at tight end next to Sean Andrews most of the time. And, when those guys would down block, Cedric Cobbs was the running back then. I could have ran through some of the holes that they created. I mean, they would wipe out whole sides of the defense, and it'd be 7-10 yards before anybody would even get a hand on the running back. He was just so powerful. And then you see this big guy being able to move and catch balls. He had really soft hands. Obviously, he's not the burner that's going to tear it down the field, but he was able to create mismatches with his sheer size and athletic ability that it was really intriguing. The thing was, everyone didn't know what to do with him. Arkansas even wanted to make him an offensive lineman, but he was really resistant to that in the beginning. And he started out as a defensive lineman there. He was a D lineman and tight end in high school. So they were doing the same thing, trying to find the best spot for him. And again, he just saw himself as a big athlete, in which he still is to this day. So that was the hardest part of the projection with him, was just figuring out where to put him to start and where he ultimately wanted to be personally too.
So I guess the big takeaway I've got, for our listeners is seeing a guy that can make that transition from tight end to offensive line, D-line to offensive line. You talk about linebacker to D-line, like corner to safety. How hard is that? Like, did you have to go through like the mental Rolodex to think of all right, like I've seen a guy like this make this transition, or is it all just kind of faith-based? Like what goes in to try and make that kind of projection?
With this guy, there was there wasn't really a guy to you could look back on and say, yeah, this guy was, because the tight ends that usually grow into it, like Lane, for instance, weren't this big to start out with. I mean, Jason was 300 plus at the combine and still ran sub-5. And when he showed up, we got him in the building, and then that first mini camp, I remember him running a crossing route, and Lawyer Malloy had just joined us from New England. And Lawyer, went for a ball at the same time as Jason, and he hit Jason, just casual contact, both going for the ball. Jason caught it, and Lawyer bounced off, and he got up and was like, what the heck was that? Like, he turned around and said, are you kidding me? That guy's a tight end? And the guys just kind of chuckled a little bit because they just couldn't believe that he could do the things that he did at tight end. And eventually, obviously we just saw that, Jason had the chance to be elite at the offensive tackle position, and they finally made the move down the road. But everybody saw just what a freak of nature he was every step of the way. But to project it going in, nobody knew really where to put him, and Jason didn't really know where he wanted to be yet either. So, do you feel like offensive line, especially offensive tackle, is that like one of the more, I don't want to say developmental, but where like there's the most projection? Like there's all these different cases of, like this guy I don't know what he is now, but he could be an offensive tackle down the line. I feel like you look around the league, and there's a lot of those guys that, 6, 7, 8 years ago, they weren't offensive tackles. And now you kind of, to see what they can be. Right. Again, those guys were typically the biggest guy at their high school, but also the most athletic. They were the best basketball player on the team. They played tight end, or someone, like Lane. Lane was a quarterback in high school. Right. Like those guys were the best athletes at the school, but they're also the biggest people. So they had the ball in their hand all the time. And ultimately, they will grow into that offensive tackle because of the sheer size they are as a human and as they naturally grow into those bodies. But because they were so ultimate athletes just to begin with, they start out at those premier positions that are the athlete, quote unquote, athlete positions coming through the ranks.
All right, well, joining us to talk about Eagles wide receiver Desean Jackson, a guy who was the West Coast area scout back in 2008 and is now the senior director of college scouting, Anthony Patch. Patch, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, Fran.
Let's talk a little bit about Desean Jackson. And like as I mentioned, you were the West Coast area scout when he was coming out of college. So give us some of your memories now. Or we're 12 years removed from him being entering the NFL draft. So what were your thoughts on Desean when he was a Cal?
Yeah, Fran, he was you walk up and see him at practice and you're like, holy cow. I mean, he looked like he was 160 pounds soaking wet. And you're like, is this guy really a guy? Now, he was a, early out guy too. He was that Long Beach Poly kid. That's a national high school program. So it wasn't like, and he was a national recruit. He was a big time guy coming out, but, he didn't wow you when you walked up on him. Let's just say that at practice. And, Coach Tedford was the coach at the time, and that was a good program at the time. I mean, they had a 3-receiver group with the Lavelle Hawkins, and I remember a guy named Robert Jordan with the receivers there, and all of them were pretty formidable. And then they had in the backfield, you got to remember that Justin Forsett, and then Marshawn Lynch was there. and they had tight end Craig Stevens, who went like in the 4th round to I believe Tennessee, along with Alex Mack, who went the 1st round to Cleveland. So that was a good Cal program. And I just remember seeing him. I'm like, holy cow, how's this guy going to survive? Then he threw on the tape, and it was just, easy mover, explosive, sudden, change of direction. And, I went to a Tennessee game there at Berkeley that year. I think it was the 1st or 2nd game of that fall. And, I sit in there, and he takes this punt and makes about 5 or 6 guys miss. And I'm like, holy cow. I mean, his start to, his change of direction, start was unbelievable. And then I think he put up like 100+ yards that game too. And I just walked out there and like, holy cow, nobody can hit this guy. So, I think at that time he was 160 some pounds. They said he came in the program 155 pounds or something. And, I don't think he's much more than that right now. He might be high 170s, Fran. But, the old saying, if you can't hit him, let him, keep him playing. And, nobody could get a target on him as a hitter. So
is that the takeaway, I guess, for our listeners is like, don't knock a guy because of that size, or is he just a unicorn? Like in terms of like a guy at that size being able to have the level of success that he had for as long as he's done it? Yeah,
he's one of the most unique players I've scouted in person in terms of just speed and looseness, what you want. And he's just not a deep target now. He could run all the routes underneath, and I'll just say unique, Fran.
Well, joining us to go back a little bit into the Wayback Machine, we're going to go back to 2011 here on Scout Stories this week. Anthony Patch, the Senior Director of College Scouting. We're going to talk about Jason Kelce coming out of Cincinnati. And Patch, certainly an interesting evaluation with Jason Kelce just because of kind of the outlier he is in terms of his size and movement along the offensive line. Interested to kind of get your takeaways, your anecdotes from evaluating him during the pre-draft process back in 2011.
Yeah, Jason, talking, we talked to Desean. You're talking about an outlier, like you mentioned, just size-wise, it's crazy. I mean, when you look back when I evaluated him and, his size, you can talk to Jason. I've talked to Jason about this too. I mean, his pro day, he played at, 190s, but his pro day, he was like at 280 something, I believe. And so that even drew redder flag. But even at the combine, I believe he was light. And but he was one that was a blue collar kid, a Cleveland kid. He was a walk on at Cincinnati. They didn't know what to do with him right away. I believe they put him at linebacker, and then he finally settled in at center, and just unbelievable. Another guy you always look. So does the size show up on the tape? And never did really. He was never out of position. Always had leverage, and speed speaks for itself. But for his size, to be able to anchor on guys and stuff like that, it never showed as a flaw when you're watching Jason. And so, I'll tell you what, man. Talk about another guy that's just been an alpha, a beast, and a guy for us over the last 9-10 years now. It's just remarkable, and a guy that's been really durable. You talk about does the durability show up at all in it? For the size, and it hasn't at all. And so great find, day 3 pick, and it's just unbelievable. Cincinnati's treated us good.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Day 3 pick, Fran. I mean, we just go back and between him and Brent and Trent Cole, I mean, all day 3 picks, and it's just like, holy cow! I went there 2 years ago and was talking to some of our staff. I said, man, you guys have been really good to us. So I talk about, just hard-nosed kids, all those kids, Cole, Brent, and, just unbelievable. I don't know, we wouldn't have had the success we had without these 3 for sure.
And some programs I feel like just have based on the culture that they've been able to build, those are the kinds of play. What you're getting if you're getting a guy from Cincinnati. I feel like, Temple has kind of garnered that reputation over the course of the last few years too. Like, maybe not a Power 5 school, but what you're getting from that program in terms of the kids off the field and their makeup.
Yeah, it's one of those schools. You just don't. Even though it's a mid-major program, you just don't sleep on them because there's guys out there every year. The foxhole guys that you can win with, And for, Jason's sake, and Trent didn't run well, but every time you throw on the tape, he's in the backfield. And, same thing with Brent. He didn't run well, but, he can, block and he can catch, he can flex them out. He proved that. And, Jason was 280 at his pro day, 280 at the combine. He had green numbers across the board. And then those guys, you just go back to the tape and see if it still matches. And, nothing showed up to say he can do it at our level, and he has.
And I love what you said, too, about whether it shows up on the tape or not. And that's, I guess, the takeaway for our listeners for this one is like, I think so often we see, this guy's undersized. So he plays undersized. He's too small, or he's going to have issues. If it doesn't show up on the tape, I mean, it kind of changes the discussion a little bit, right?
Yeah, no question. And he did test well at the combine, but, most people have said, well, he's 280 pounds. He's, 6'2". He's not the ideal height, and he ran well, and you see that now. His outside runs are unbelievable. His ability to get on screens and locate and pick up, and that was the same way at Cincinnati. I mean, his angles and look to finish. I mean, this guy had grit, nasty in his play, and still does. And you saw that. I can look at my report. I looked at it a couple of days ago, and it's like it could match up to what you're saying now about the kid. I mean, Jason, he's not a kid anymore, but unbelievable combo blocks. Second level, everything, and just the leadership. I mean, he takes ownership. He's a true captain-like guy for us, obviously, and I mean, he's a guy you want in your foxhole for sure.
All right, joining us to talk about Eagles running back Corey Clement is Senior Director of College Scouting, Anthony Patch. And Patch, welcome back to the show, man. I wanted to talk about Eagles running back Corey Clement. And, coming out, he was an undrafted free agent. And there was always like this allure, around the Wisconsin running backs and the production they've been able to have. But, they didn't produce at the NFL level all the time. I'm interested to kind of get your memories on scouting Corey and your experiences with him leading up to the NFL draft.
Yeah, Corey had a really, unfortunately for Corey at Wisconsin, he was hurt, up to his last year, basically. I mean, he had a procedure a couple of times. And so really his lone year was his last year. But he made the most of what he had that last year at Wisconsin. And, he kind of fell through the cracks going undrafted, because of the injury history probably. And just his testing numbers weren't great. But he's a local kid. He was a highly touted kid, obviously, going to Wisconsin. And it's unfortunate he had the injury history going into at Wisconsin. Otherwise, he would have been drafted for sure. But, he ran I think 1,300 yards in his last year and only season starting at Wisconsin that year.
Yeah, he was a guy too, like I mentioned, when you have those that history, going back to, Ron Dane at Wisconsin, and so many guys that have been so productive in that school, despite the change in coaching staffs, despite the change in systems. For our listeners, I feel like that gets talked about a lot is like, oh, well, stay away from the Wisconsin running back, or, back when I remember when I was in high school, it was like, oh, the Florida receivers, don't touch the Florida receivers. They never work out. How do you kind of fight through that as a scout when you're, evaluating these guys on an individual basis, so year over year?
Yeah, he just, I don't know. And Corey had a great senior year, and I think he just got floated out because, the injuries, and he didn't test well. But he, like I said, he ran for 1,300 yards that year, and we did the due process. He was a local kid, so people obviously knew him in the building and felt obviously really good after the draft. I mean, we had draftable grades across the board. So, after the draft, you're thinking, this guy's still on the board. Is it medical or is it, testing? And we were just happy as all get out to get him after the draft. Approved, the one thing we didn't see I didn't see when I went on the visit, on teams. And geez, Fran, I don't know, his impact in special teams for us early in the career here with Coach Phipp has been unbelievable. So that aspect he didn't see. And, he was there, Melvin Gordon was before him, James White, those guys have been good pros. So take every case by case, but, we felt good about Corey getting him where we did and what he's done for us.
How do you, when you're looking at a guy that, and you said you couldn't necessarily predict the impact that he would have on special teams, that opening kickoff that year, the Super Bowl year 2017, he's down there making the stop on the opening kick. Are there things that can kind of be telltale signs for those guys that didn't play special teams, in college because they were a full-time player on offense or defense and they just weren't asked to, that say like, all right, like this guy we think could project to be able to do that for us in the NFL?
Yeah, and, it's, I look back when I was scouting out west, USC. I mean, Pete Carroll used to use all his starters on on all the cover teams, all the punt teams, on all the special teams. But then you go to some of these schools and they're just too valuable as seniors to, they're in a role on offense or defense that they don't want to risk their injury. So we had no idea that he'd be the impact guy he was, that, the first couple of years he was with us. Even as a hands catcher,
Yep.
Talk about that catch, I just, and that's the thing, Wisconsin backs aren't, sometimes that's the knock on them. You don't see him catch the ball. But I'll tell you what, man, talk about a big time catch that he had for us.
No question.
And we wouldn't be what we have now in that trophy case. Obviously.
One of the biggest plays in Eagles history, without question. Well, joining us once again here on the Journey of the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, for our Scout Story segment is Eagles Assistant Director of Player Personnel, Ian Cunningham, to talk about safety Rodney McLeod coming out of college and coming out of UVA. He was a corner, I believe, right? So take us through that projection and how you kind of viewed him in college and the transition he's made so far in the NFL.
Rodney played a little bit of both. I've known about Rodney for several years because after I left UVA, I think he came in a couple years after me, if not the year after me. Coaches always raved about him, his football intelligence, who he was as a person off the field, his competitiveness, his toughness. The thing about Rodney was just he was an undersized player that didn't fit all the measurables that you were looking for in terms of the numbers, right? But the football player on the field, you saw the flashes. It was hard. It was a hard projection to say, where is he going to fit? Is he an undersized corner? Is he undersized safety? Can he get bigger? Can he get faster? All those question marks. And that's really one of the reasons why he ended up going undrafted. But a lot of the players and a lot of the coaches at UVA raved about this player for all four or five of his years at UVA. And I remember one coach who's no longer there, but he literally stood on the table for Rodney and said, I'm telling you, Ian, this guy's going to be a player in the league. And look what Rodney's become, a captain as a rookie, leading the league or leading his team in tackles on special teams at St. Louis. And then, eventually us getting him in Philadelphia. It's a tremendous player.
So you've obviously been doing this a lot longer and at a much higher level than me. I'm on the outside and kind of watching these guys. I feel like the way I'm starting to look at the positions like up the middle, especially like linebacker and safety, the intangibles part really can kind of offset any of those physical limitations. You get outside into space, you get a corner, a wide receiver, those traits become, I feel like, more and more important. But you talked about like the competes and, the football intelligence and stuff like that with Rodney. Is that why you can see some of those guys that, maybe were passed over, were undrafted, or they go late in the draft? Every year it seems like, these guys become 3-down players in the NFL, and maybe they weren't expected to be that based off of, what their pre-draft process looked like.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it comes down to all the things that you can't measure, right? You can't measure a person's heart. You can't measure a person's toughness and grit and what they're going to want to accomplish, their fortitude. But, with Rodney, like that's what he had. He had all those things that we now look for. We try to put him through in the interview process to get to know the players, and obviously all our sources that we talk to at the schools. But Rodney had all the things that you're looking for off the field in terms of he was going to make himself into the player that he is. And that's a testament to Rodney and what he's overcome and who he is as a person and as a man.
Well, joining us to talk about Eagles offensive lineman Isaac Seumalo is Senior Director of College Scouting, Anthony Patch. Patch, welcome back to the show, man. We're going to talk about a guy from your neck of the woods up there. He came out of Oregon State in 2016. We're talking about Isaac Seumalo. Patch, take us through your memories of evaluating Isaac coming out of Oregon State and the Beavers program.
Yeah, Isaac was, good player. Isaac, he got some genes to him. His dad has been a lifelong college D-line coach. He was up at Oregon State there with Mike Riley for years and years. And, Isaac's older brother played there as well, and his sister was a volleyball player. And just, even at Oregon State, it's, what we look in O-linemen, it's just, versatility. Even at Oregon State, like he does for us, he played every position, started there, every position. He played, guard, tackle, and, some center, not a lot of center. It just didn't look out of place. Isaac was a great athlete, high FBI. Just everything looked easy with the kid, stunts, pickups, probably not the most explosive knockback power you'd see in a guy, but just always in the right place. And, feet, angles, hips, everything were, excellent. And so, he was a junior coming out, so that, no all-star game, so, combine was first time meeting him. And then, he's an even keel kid, Fran, never high too low, and just real smart. And that sold us even more. You can't take enough of these guys. And, we got him in the 3rd round that year. And then, I think we bounced back in the 5th round. And, it's just about to get Vitae that year. So we got 2 good players that year. We felt to put up front.
You mentioned the lineage, being the son of a coach. For our listeners at home, why is that talked about? Why is that so important? Kind of a thing to have in a guy's background is, just being the son of a coach.
I just think, probably growing up, it's most likely this kid, he's in the football office all the time. Most coaches' kids are in the football office either after school, in the summertime. They're always around the building, the practice field. So I think, they know they're more apt to be a what we call a pro and buying into the process no matter what, And so I think, just being around their dads, especially, Joe at, his dad, Joe, being a lifelong coach around Oregon State and being up there with them, he got to see not only the school he was going to, but how it was ran in the process. It ran for years before he even, stepped foot on Oregon State's campus, being from there and looking at what's happening. So I think that's the case for most, players that have coaches as dad, either the high school level or college level. It's just that's all they know. So they're watching film with their dad. They're, after the office watching practice. So we always make a point to note that in our write-ups and our so forth.
Well, joining us once again here on the Journey of the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, Eagles Southwest area scout Sean Heinlein. Sean, thanks so much for joining us once again, man.
Thanks, Fran. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about Eagles corner Darius Slay. I remember when he was coming out of Mississippi State, it was him and Jonathan Banks, the 2 corners, for the Bulldogs that year. And they were both really, really talented. I'm interested to kind of get your memories on scouting Slay, and I guess Banks too, because it almost was like not a package deal, but since they were both so talented, you couldn't talk about one without the other. Memories on kind of evaluating him and projecting him to the league.
Right, that was the thing. When you went in there, Banks was the high-rated guy that everyone was wanting because he had such high production going into that final season. So you're really anticipating going in and seeing this guy. And then you walk out on the practice field and you watch Slay move around. You're like, holy cow, who is this kid? He takes your eye because he was a much better athlete in Scout's eyes. He was just so fluid. I mean, obviously he had great size for a corner, showed ball skills in practice. You're like, holy cow, because he had come from junior college, so he wasn't really on the radar like Banks, who had put together a couple of years in SEC play. So Slay kind of just popped some eyes when he walked out there on the field of, hey, we've got to do some more digging here. There's more than just one guy.
How hard is that to do? I should say how hard is that to do, but do you almost like have to try hard to not get suckered into like, all right, like I know I'm coming in to watch this guy, then not get tunnel vision on just that one player and not miss out on, oh, by the way, there's another blue chip guy right across the field?
Right. Not so much. I mean, you expect to have some surprises at the SEC schools for sure. I mean, there's guys that are backups that end up playing for a long time in the NFL. Ron Brooks, who we drafted in Buffalo and came to Philadelphia. He only started a couple of games at all at LSU,
right.
But was a productive player when he played. And so you kind of expect that there's going to be guys, there's going to be surprises. So you want to keep your eye open for all those guys. Because, again, sometimes they slip through the cracks for a little bit, especially coming from a junior college or something like that. They just haven't found their footing yet in major college football. That's all.
I feel like one big topic that a lot of people will bring up, especially when we talk about Banks versus Slay, was like, and it's not really a black and white discussion, is like traits versus production. In the scouting world, like, how do you guys talk about that? How is that kind of discussed amongst you and your peers?
Again, it comes down to a thing of like potential. Like, where is this guy projected to be in a couple of years? With Banks, because of his traits and his production that he had in the SEC, you kind of already knew what he was going to be going into it. With Darius, it was more of where's he going to be in a couple of years because he's just getting his feet underneath him, coming from junior college, finally getting to start at Mississippi State, putting together the production he did that senior year. It was again the projection of where is he going to be once he works on his technique, once he becomes more refined at the position. How good is this guy going to become? Like, will the production follow the development would be the big thing.
I mean, he obviously goes on to become big play Slay that we all know and love.
Absolutely.
Well, joining us this week here on the Journey of the Draft podcast to talk about Eagles offensive tackle Lane Johnson is Senior Director of College Scouting Anthony Patch. Patch, welcome back to the show, man. I want to talk about Lane Johnson, the first-round pick back in 2013. Interested to kind of get your memories on Lane coming out of college and, the impact that you expected from him, I guess, throughout the course of his NFL career based off what you saw at Oklahoma.
Yeah, Lane's was an interesting case. We had the fourth pick, and so we felt strongly we were going to get a strong player, and we did. Lane didn't have you look at the top two picks there with Fisher and Jokel, they had they're at one place for the whole time, Fisher being at Central for 4 years and Jokel at A&M. And, Lane had a more traveled road, being a JC kid and just changing positions. I mean, he was more a projection more than any of those two there. I'll give all, credit to Andy Spire was down there on the visit for us at Oklahoma, and Stoutland did it over and beyond work with him, the post-season process, private workouts and so forth. But he was a JC kid. He played the tight end quarterback, went to Oklahoma. They didn't know where to put him at first. I think a defensive end. And then settled down at offensive tackle. And, looking back at Lane, you looked at him in person. I saw him at the Cotton Bowl that year. You're like, holy cow, this kid still can grow. I mean, he was 300 pounds-ish. And I, played at A&M, and he had a standout game. And I remember going to the Cotton Bowl that year, and you go on the field, and this guy's got painted black face, and he's into it. And, it was like a more selling point. And he went up against the Moore kid that ended up going to the Giants from A&M and shut him down that year or in that game. And it was just like, holy cow, this is it. And he played right tackle, left tackle through the year, 35-inch arms. And you just looked at it as lower at half, and you're like, this kid could get bigger. Stoutland did an unbelievable job that year. I remember he was sold on the kid, almost immediately. And, he's proven to be a, best right tackle. We always thought you could put him over at left, but, he settled in. I'd be hard-pressed to find a better athletic right tackle in the league right now.
And it's so interesting talking about offensive linemen because I feel like, there's obviously an allure towards the guys that, this guy was a 4-year starter and a 3-year captain, and he's got, X amount of starts, X amount of reps under his belt. But I feel like there's also so many guys that, maybe made that transition to the offensive line late in their careers, or, they played defensive line or they played tight end. Obviously Jason Peters, a great example of that went on to become great players. I remember reading, may rest in peace, Howard Mudd's book, a couple summers ago, and he talked about all the great offensive linemen that, made that move from one position or another late. They didn't accept offensive line until late in their career. When you have a guy that, where the arrow could potentially be pointing up, what is the feeling when you're trying to make that projection? Obviously, there's a little bit more risk involved, right?
Yeah, no question. And that, that's what I think, we saw in that draft, but you look at those first two tackles, like I said, you saw those guys play for 3 years. Fisher 4 years, but Jokel was a 3-year guy. And so there's more risk, in a guy that, was whatever weight at Kilgore. How's he going to translate, going to Oklahoma, he did well. And still you're seeing the body develop in the frame. So you're seeing a kid and the learning and everything. Yeah, there's definitely more risk involved, no question. But that's why you do more and more. And, we got more familiar with them, top 30 visits, workouts, combine, the whole thing. And then you think in more risk, but there's a lot more upside with this kid. And I think we felt pretty good with those top 3 picks of that draft.
Well, joining us this week here on Scout Stories to talk about the Eagles defensive tackle, Fletcher Cox, is Senior Director of College Scouting, Anthony Patch. And Patch, welcome back to the show, man. Excited to get your thoughts on Fletcher Cox when he was coming out of Mississippi State back in 2012. What were some of your memories of the pre-draft process when it came to number 91?
Yeah, Fletcher, small-town Mississippi kid. He was there, signed with Sylvester Groom as a first coach, and Dan Mullen came in. Highly thought of there, unbelievable strength, size, and explosion, and, really a guy that they lined everywhere in that front. And so, he was young coming out, but spoken highly of there, just an old country guy and, likes to hunt, fish, as and just, nothing bad said about the kid. And just, he had a great, junior year, and that's the year he came out, and you could see that on the tape. And, I remember going back to the process now. Jim Washburn was our D-line coach, and we were going back and forth between him and the Brockers kid from LSU, who's had a good career for the Rams and still with his same team with the Rams now. And, Fletcher's been above and beyond expectations taking him. And, I remember sweating out that draft and, the kind of the surprise. And I remember being there, and actually a team, I won't mention who, but wanted to trade up for us. And it was they were offering a lot of ammo to come up, and it turns out that's who they wanted was Fletcher. And the one we sweated out, we didn't see coming was the Poe kid going before us.
Yep.
To Kansas City. So we didn't see that coming at all, but we were kind of sweating out those last picks going up to there. And Coach Washburn did a great job. Brett Veach, researching him practice film, but we all felt great with Fletcher as a character kid, and just he's just an ox, man. We've seen he's a dominant force for us over the years, and he's been durable, just big smile on his face, plays the game with passion, and it's been great.
So you brought up two names. That was going to be my follow-up. Was I remember that year, obviously, being here in the building, and it was like one of my first off season. Yeah, it was my first off season here in the NovaCare complex. I remember the big conversation in the media at that point was, Fletcher Cox versus Michael Brockers versus Dontari Poe. There was a big year for the corners. I think that was Mo Claiborne and Gilmore and Kirkpatrick. But the other guy everyone was talking about was Kuechly. But when you're looking at those three D tackles, and not necessarily in that case, but when you're kind of having those discussions, just take us into how fun is that to be in a scouting room, in those rooms, in those meetings, when it's like, all right, we're going to have to kind of stack the board here and have these conversations and pick out how we're going to stack, player A versus player B versus player C. What are those meetings like, being inside there?
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And that's what you do though. Every pick you have, if this guy's not here, you have this guy. You have a group of 3 or 4 guys, but in terms of position with the Poe and the Brockers and the Cox. I mean, I remember going to Coach Washburn's office and Veach, and he's asking us, can we get practice tape? I mean, we were going down to practice tape, get a one-on-one practice tape, just to, to cross off the final stuff with him. It gets a little crazy, but again, you're trying to go over, as much as you can and talking to as many people as you can. But I do remember going into Jim's office, and he'd be like, is there any way we can get practice tape? We usually can't, schools won't give you that, but, we had practice LSU tape. We had, the Mississippi practice tape. I mean, it got to that point, like, the combine, the fall tape wasn't good enough. Let's go, because that was close. So it was, yeah, he brought back memories right there, Fran.
That's good. So, I love that.
Fletch has been unbelievable. Like I said, his durability and his fight through adversity, and he's been an absolute force inside for us. And at Mississippi State, they aligned him everywhere, and that was the other thing. Could this guy be just a D tackle on the forefront, but they lined him at end and all that. And he sack numbers, TFL numbers were great. And, so he's even been better, than we thought. So
I remember them lining him up off the end, and you just see this guy's 300 some pounds, flying off the edge. Just a crazy, crazy talent. Well, happy to be joined this week by Eagles Assistant Director of Player Personnel, Ian Cunningham, to talk about Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert. Now, it's been a couple years in the league, former second-round pick out of South Dakota State. Ian, take us back in time a little bit. What was your feeling, your projection on Dallas when he was coming out, and take us a little bit inside the evaluation?
Fran, I remember watching TCU, I believe it was 2016. South Dakota State played at TCU, and it was Dallas's junior year. And there was a guy at South Dakota State that kept flashing on tape. I was actually watching TCU tape, and I was like, who is this guy? They ended up having him, Dallas, and another, actually a receiver the following year. And then fast forward to the 2017 season, thinking that I was going to be able to see him in Frisco at the championship game. Unfortunately, they lost to JMU that year, but was really excited to be able to go see him there because I wasn't able to get to South Dakota State during the fall. And then fast forward then to the Senior Bowl. And at the Senior Bowl, you get to see him, finally get to see what he looks like in person, how he looks in his pads, how he moves around. It was good to see him for a short period of time because he got hurt at the Senior Bowl. And then you go to the combine, same thing. He wasn't able to go through the combine drills, but we did get a chance to interview him at the combine, get a chance to sit down and get to know him a little bit. And obviously on the 30 visit. But, watching Dallas and evaluating him, you saw a big physical specimen at the tight end position to play what we call F tight end. He was outside in the slot, but then you had a couple plays where you saw him in line as a blocker. And you projected, hey, this guy could be a Y for us as well, or a complete tight end. And that's what you're really looking for. And that year, it was him and a couple of other players as one of the top tight ends coming out. And just evaluating him against that talent at South Dakota State, you wanted to see if he could dominate that level of talent, and he did. And then fast forward, kind of going back and looking at the TCU game, he dominated the talent at TCU as well. So it was good to watch him and good to be able to evaluate him, because you were able to see the things that we were needing to see if he was going to be able to translate on our level. And we got to see that at South Dakota State and versus TCU as well.
I remember one of the big narratives about Dallas, when he was coming out was, great pass catcher, but what can he be as a blocker? He wasn't asked to do it. And I remember talking with Eagles tight ends coach Justin Peel after the draft. And it was like, all right, well, let's pull a couple plays where you can kind of see the flashes. But at this kid, he's 6'5", 6'6", he's 255. Like, we can coach that into him. And I guess it goes back to that discussion of, it's not what just because you weren't asked to do it often in college doesn't mean you can do it or you can't do it in the NFL. He comes in the league and becomes one of the best blocking tight ends, certainly in the NFL, in short order.
Correct. You just want to look for the body control, the balance, the core strength, the movement off the snap. If he's what we call, can he uncoil his hips? Can he unlock his hips? Obviously, the technique work. That's why we have a coach like Coach Peel, who's outstanding. He's going to get him technically sound, and he's going to develop him. And that's what he did with Dallas, because he's really turned himself into a complete tight end.
Well, great stuff there from Ian Cunningham, Anthony Patch, and Sean Heinlein. Obviously, you can't follow any of those three guys on Twitter, but you can go follow me. I'm at Eagles XOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce with Eagles Entertainment. You know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on social media. That's one way to support the show, but the best way is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, and leave us a comment. I wanted to give a shout out today to someone who did just that. Can't Catch Clacks left a 5-star review saying, will there be a quarterback competition, or will the job just be handed to Carson Wentz to start the season? And look, that's obviously the big question right now that everybody wants to know about the quarterback position at this point in the offseason as we get closer and closer, not just to free agency, but to the NFL draft and to OTAs, hopefully, fingers crossed, and then into training camp. You just got to look at what Coach Nick Sirianni has said over the course of the media sessions that he's done so far. And the big thing that he has said is, look, they're going to look at every single position. He's not going to say right now what that's going to look like, if it's going to be a competition or if he's going to name a starter before the season. Right now, they're still in the evaluation mode. All the positions are going to be evaluated. I don't know the answer. I'm in the same boat as you. So I'm very anxious to be able to see how that position's going to play out. All we can do now is just kind of talk about it. And so that's kind of where we're at. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more insight, but I know it's a question on the front of every fan's mind. So certainly something that will continue to be talked about in the coming weeks. Thanks so much to you, Can't Catch Clacks, and all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcasts here at Eagles Entertainment. That being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the Duffy House, I'm Fran Duffy. We'll talk to you later this week.
In just over 3 years, Eagles Autism Foundation has raised millions of dollars for autism research and care. But this is about so much more than just fundraising. This is about making a transformational difference in the lives of those affected by autism. This is about bringing our community together. With inclusive, sensory-friendly events and accessible resources, we meet families where they need us most and where we can serve them best. Together, we're united in our mission to improve the lives of the autism community and to turn awareness into action. It's what we focus on every day in every way.